Okay, so finally I'm not looking at an Atom X5 Z8750 powered tablet, but this one here is the Teclast Tbook 16 Power. Now why it's called Power? Well, they put the most powerful Atom chip in here that you can get, and probably will be the last powerful Atom ever of the Cherry Trails at least, and that is an Atom X7 Z8750, which has a maximum turbo of 2.56 GHz, a large 8 GB of RAM, which is really good for both Windows and Android on there, of course. Now, Android, you hardly ever see that kind of amount. I don't think I've ever actually seen that. The highest I've seen is 6 GB on some mobiles now that are just coming out. So plenty of RAM there to play around with. Now, other specs include wireless in, Bluetooth for a Type-C port for charging and data. And we also have a full-sized USB port, but I'll show you the full design of that in just a second. Now, this is going to be a rather long review because it will be covering both Android and Windows performance and gaming there. So if you're interested in seeing just the gaming portions, or you only want to see Android, for example, then feel free to skip ahead to the parts that interest you the most. So the design of it, I'll just walk you around and show you everything that the tablet has on there. We have this flap on the side here to start with. Now below that, behind it, is where you insert your micro SD card. Now that supports up to 256 gigabyte cards. I have tested out 128 that I have, and it works perfectly fine. Along here we have a micro HDMI. This is a microphone, DC in for charging, and the Type-C port. Now that is USB 3 Type-C. It will allow you also to charge via this port, and you can access data at the same time. But I have actually just checked out and found that it will not power an external hard drive, the Type-C port, but the USB 3 port will. Here we have the 3.5mm headphone jack. Along the top here, you can see we have some power buttons. Now these are made out of plastic. The whole frame is plastic, the main frame of it. But the rear of it, this part along here, that's made out of alloy, as well as the kickstand, which doesn't have a fixed position. A rear autofocus 5 megapixel camera. Now I'm not going to go into any detail really with that camera. It takes a very average photo. You can at least focus on text and take photos if you needed to do that, if you didn't have a mobile phone on you. So along the back of it here, we do have these magnets along here, so that will hold the kickstand in place when you're traveling and moving around, so you don't have to worry about that flapping around. Now the maximum angle it will go back is that far. So I mean, it's not the greatest, but it's got a good range of movements there, so you can actually use this on your lap because the magnets on the keyboard release are strong enough to keep that in place, but it's not ideal, not the most comfortable. So the screen is a 1080p screen, and you'll notice that it has a dated look to it because it's got very large bezels on there. And the other thing as well is the DPI that they've used in Android is rather large, so icons look a bit larger there. 1080p panel. Personally, I would have liked to have seen at least 16:10 aspect ratio. So on the right hand side, finally, we have two side-facing speakers. I will test these later on, but I can say now that they are very average. They do have a bit of mids to them and some bass, but they do lack in volume. Oh, and of course, along the bottom, that is the 5-pin pogo port connector for the keyboard, which you simply just hold up to it, and the magnets will let that just clip in. So like the Tbook 16S, it shares the exact same keyboard. Magnetic clips in. We do have two different positions to improve the typing angle here. Personally, I like to have it actually just on the raised up level because I find it's a little easier to type on. Now it has virtually no flex in it. It's very solid. Good key travel on the keys. Nice layout. We do have print screen buttons, your page up and down, end and home. Everything is there. Brightness control. However, there is no volume up and down controls on this. We do at least have an option there to mute the speakers. You can also disable the touchpad. Now the touchpad is very short, you can see. The width is okay. Now they have increased the sensitivity of the pad to compensate for the lack of height that it has, and it does have hardware left and right mouse buttons. It doesn't support the annoying swipe gestures in Windows, which I often trigger on such small touchpads here, which is a good thing. It does have a double tap. So it's okay, it does the job, but really it's not that great just because of that lack of the height that it has, and the typing experience is actually really quite good. It's just like your Surface type covers and perfectly fine. So tablet and the type cover combined comes in at 1.2 kilos. So it's a little heavy. It's not exactly lightweight. And the thickness of both the tablet and type cover, that comes into around 15 millimeters. Now overall, I rate the build quality as being very good. It's a solid tablet, well put together, there's no creaks in it, and it comes with a optional quality type cover keyboard. So the Tbook 16 Power does support a stylus. It's not this exact model here that I have. I'm not going to review the stylus, and I'll explain why, because it's basically just a more accurate pointer. That's all it does, because the tip on this, it doesn't have any pressure sensitivity whatsoever. So it's just a very, very basic stylus. So we have two side-firing speakers as mentioned, so stereo separation isn't good here. I'd rather have the speakers on either side if possible. Let's have a listen to how they sound. So as you can hear from that they have a reasonable amount of volume to them. It's not actually the worst I've heard, but they do tend to distort a little bit there at 100% volume. So speakers really, they are quite average. Now to look at the display in more detail, I've actually got the brightness set to 100%, and you'll notice that it's not particularly bright. Now I measured the brightness, it's only around 180 lumens of brightness, which just isn't bright enough. And because it is a non-laminated display, you're also more susceptible to reflections, and it does have a pre-applied screen protector, which is why you can see those little dots down there. Now the colors and the blacks and the viewing angles of the screen are good, however. Now I don't know whether it's just my unit that has this problem with the maximum brightness, but if this affects all of the Tbook 16 powers, then this is not good to see. I don't know why Teclast have used such a dim panel or set the brightness down so low. So I'm going to start off first here in Android, show you the performance here. Now how I'm capturing this is with an external capture card via HDMI out. So the ROM is actually Teclast's first ROM that is running Android 6. All the previous ones have been Android 5.1. Now we have plenty of memory, as mentioned, 8 gigabytes. And typical use here, you have normally around about 6.5, 6.8 gigabytes free. So you can go crazy multitasking on this. It's going to be very hard to be able to actually fill that up completely. So I did run through some of my usual benchmarks. So first up here is the free available space that you first get when you boot this up. Now there are some bloaty kind of applications. You'll see here that I've got a couple on there. You can see 360, Baidu, all of these can be removed. Luckily you can uninstall all the bloat, which is good. And here is the Geekbench 4 score. So performance there is definitely a step up from the typical Atom X5 Z8300, which would normally have a single core score there of around 700 or 800. And here's the Antutu 6.2.1 score, which is close to the performance, or actually slightly better than a Snapdragon 650. But of course this being an X86 processor, it can run Windows as well. Something the Snapdragons can't do. So when you install a SD card in there, you can set it up because of the Android 6 option to use as the internal storage as well. So you can store apps on there and everything. So this is really good considering we've only got about 16, 17 gigabytes free. Now here's the performance of Ice Storm Extreme. This score is a step up definitely from the Atom X5s. And lastly, the wireless speeds that I tested out. So I've only got a 3G connection at the moment, and that has pretty much maxed out the speeds. I haven't noticed any problems with the wireless range or performance. It seems to be quite good, probably aided by the fact that the whole housing is made out of plastic too on this particular tablet. So performance-wise, it actually feels quite good. It's quick, it's snappy, and it's easy to multitask and go between different applications without too much of a problem there. And I will also show you that the browser performance, again, very good. And because we have, I think, so much RAM too, it's just making things a little bit smoother. So I'll just quickly go over here to TechTablets and show you how quick that loads it. Now, I haven't actually loaded this up before, so nothing's been cached. Of course, this is a little bit dependent on my internet connection. So that loads in quick. Touch accuracy, very smooth too. Very fast. I'm just using my finger there on the screen. And that works really well. So ROM performance is good, but you will notice that the icons are very large. Especially here, you can see along the side there. So those navigation, those icons there in the launcher. And that's because the DPI they have used is rather large. I wish it was a little bit smaller, those icons. And down the bottom, of course, we've got the navigation keys. So I'm going to run a couple of Android games now, and we'll have a look at how they perform and if we're going to get nice, smooth, playable frame rates or not. This title here is Eternity Warriors 4. There's some lag just then. And this one is Real Racing 3. I'm using a Bluetooth controller for this one. And this title is Modern Combat 5, a multiplayer game here. Now I must warn you that I'm really bad at this one at multiplayer, so expect some pretty bad gameplay. But so far the frame rate's looking alright. Wow, I actually managed to get a kill in this game. And he got me. Okay, so that's the basic Android performance there. You can see that it games just fine. Some of those games that had slowdown, like Eternity Warriors 4, that happens on every single device I've tried. It's just a characteristic of that game. Now, there is no way or icon or widget here to go straight over into Windows. We have to actually go through and restart normally. Now, normally there'd be a shortcut on there that would say boot into Windows. Booting into Windows, that took about 40 seconds in total because I had to go through the boot menu. So there's a few things here I wanted to point out, and that is that it's running Windows 10 Pro, and that is fully activated. You see 8 GB of RAM. They haven't dedicated any extra to the GPU here. Now, just under the device manager, the eMMC, this is a Samsung, so it's not one of those slower bWind or 4C brand ones that had terrible speeds. Although, just showing you the speeds here now, they're not wonderful. I have seen faster writes. I mean, the reads are good. A write, sequential write of only about 39 megabytes per second. That's a little on the slow side. And the 4Ks, they are actually okay there. Not too bad for this type of drive, that is. Now, we have a Realtek wireless N card. 2.4 gigahertz, single band, and free available space. Just under 14 gigabytes. That's not really enough. Time to look at streaming 4K. This is via YouTube. Now I've enabled the stats here. You can see that the full resolution that it is displaying there. Well, it's not actually displaying that whole resolution, of course, because the screen's only 1080p. But it has dropped some frames. Buffer health seems to be okay. So let's have a look. I gave it time to buffer because my internet connection isn't exactly the best at the moment. Now to load up TechTablets.com, I haven't seen this before. I haven't loaded this before on this, so it's no cache, nothing like that. See how long that takes? That pops up really quick. And even better than the browser there in Android, this is really nice and smooth. And so performance there, good. Now you can run a whole lot of different tabs in there. Things like Office Docs, so if you're going to be doing document editing, Word, Internet, YouTube, as long as you stay using Edge, that is, with YouTube, then you're going to be fine. So this is what the Atom X7 Z8750 is good at. If you need something More powerful, like if you want to do a bit of 1080p video editing, or you want to do some more gaming with better frame rates, then you definitely want to step up to something like a Core M3. Now look at some Windows Store gaming. Unfortunately, there's a lot of problems with this. You can see all those artifacts happening there in the graphics, and it will eventually just lock up like it now has. Crashed completely, so I do not know what is going on there, but this is not good at all to see. Some major graphics issues, at least running that Windows Store game. So now looking at League of Legends, running in 1080p, but very low settings here. Frame rate is hovering around 40 frames per second. Now if you'd want to increase that frame rate, then you can lower the resolution down, of course. But it's running alright, and I haven't noticed any of those glitches that I encountered when playing Asphalt Extreme. So this game here is definitely playable. Now I was going to show you Counter-Strike Global Offensive, but I don't really feel there's any point to show any more gaming on this, because it is actually triggering here thermal throttling, 87 degrees, and you can see along there, thermal throttling, yes and yes, on core 0 and core number 1. Now this isn't good. So what is that actually doing? Well, that's lowering the clocks, that's lowering their performance, and it's even lowered the performance here. If we have a look now at the Geekbench 4 score here in Windows, it's thermal throttled here, I think, because look at the multi-core score. That is not really that much better than the Atom X5 Z8750, which gets about 2100. This is only getting about 2500, and a single core score, yes, that is faster because of the clock rate, but honestly, the performance, this thing is disappointing. I can't recommend this tablet. There's just no way unless you want Android. Otherwise, you're so much better off just getting a Core M3 tablet with Wacom Stylus support. The only reason to get this tablet would be for Android. That is about it. So the last thing too also is battery life. I can tell you it's average. You get between 6.5, 5.5 hours in Windows, and in Android about 5 hours. So yeah, that's not really that great. Okay, so that's my review there of the Teclast Tbook 16 power, and I must say I am really disappointed in this model. I expected so much more from the Atom X7 Z8750. I didn't expect it to have thermal throttling. I did not expect to see graphics glitches. I mean, I couldn't even play Asphalt Extreme there, it just didn't work. Alright, so the positives, there are a few there. Android performance isn't too bad. I mean, it's good. It got playable, smooth frame rates in the games there. The other thing is the keyboard. It is good to type on. I do like typing on this keyboard. Okay, the touchpad, yes, is a little short. I wish it was a bit higher there. The screen brightness is another very disappointing thing about this model. Only about 180 lumens of maximum brightness there. Just seems wrong. I must have a faulty unit here, unless Teclast did opt to set that brightness right down to try and save on battery life. Which comes to the battery life, 5 to 6 hours in Windows, around 5 hours in Android. That isn't really a wonderful figure. Should be better there. So overall, I just find this is, yes, a disappointing tablet with some definite serious flaws there. I just don't think it's worth it also price-wise. This retails for around about, all up with the keyboard and everything, about $350 US. Now for $300 US, or even under, you can get yourself a Core M3 tablet with twice the performance, a full SSD. Okay, you don't have Android on there, you don't have dual boot, but you get a Wacom Stylus too, and that is the Q/7 book or the Q/7 Stylus. I think if you don't need Android, there are a lot better options out there. Thank you so much for watching this review here, and if you did make it this far in the review, well done. It was quite a grueling task here for me to review this tablet with the issues that I encountered. And hopefully I will see you back in the channel soon with more up and coming reviews and tablets that aren't as disappointing as this one.